So this month's webinar series is on IT automation workflows. And a little background about FastFlow before we get started with the live demonstration of our IT access request. FastFlow is a web-based tool that allows you to capture data and use it to automate workflows and generate dashboards and reports within your hospital. FastFlow also allows for electronic forms to be routed instantly anywhere in your hospital, which allows you to maintain an audit trail and generate notifications to ensure completion of tasks. FastFlow can also be used to automate hundreds of different processes within your hospital. So today we will be covering an IT access request, but in the past we've also discussed and performed webinars on human resources, process automation, purchase requisitions, and in the future we will be discussing gaps in clinical documentation as well. So for today's webinar, an IT access request workflow is just one example. Our goal today is to explain to you how we can convert your existing paper workflows that you use into your hospital into an electronic format and allow you to automate your routing, data validation, tracking, and reporting of those workflows. So for each one of our workflows, we are designing each workflow in our form design software, and FastFlow supports the use of fillable text fields, checkboxes, drop-down lists, etc. FastFlow can also be used to populate data from a database lookup and allows you to perform data calculations such as addition and multiplication. So in today's demonstration, we'll be highlighting the IT access request. I have an example of the form that I'll be working on here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit here once we get started with the workflow. But basically what an IT access request form is, it allows a manager within a hospital to allow IT, set up those requests for a new user account to be created. So whether or not you have a new employee that you're training and bringing into your hospital, or if someone's being promoted or moved into a different job role, a hiring manager can fill out the IT access request form, route it over to your IT department, and make sure all the appropriate permissions and accounts that are needed, such as email, network login, portal authentication, HIS login, etc., are all set up for that particular user. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up my browser and show you the live demonstration of our IT access request form. Now, FastFlow is a web-based application. Once you log into the system, you'll be able to see all of the workflows that are assigned to your particular user account. You could search for a particular workflow, so I'm going to search for IT access. And that will bring up the workflow to allow me to start the process to be able to fill out the information that's needed for our IT department to be able to set up the new user accounts for our new employee. If I click on the form itself, this will bring up a larger view of the form that I'll be filling out today. You can see that I am going to be filling out the employee name, employee ID, some information about their position and department, along with the requester information. That would be myself. I'm logged into the system as Ryan Brown, and I am a nursing manager in our demonstration system. And then down below, I have a few checkboxes and drop-down lists that I'm going to use to populate their requests on what type of user accounts I want to set up for my new nurse that I'm hiring. Finally, down below, I have an area to write in any exceptions that I need. So if I need to request special permissions for this user, I could put those details there. And at the very bottom, I have a list of all the electronic signatures. So what's really nice about FastFlow versus your paper documentation workflows is that it allows you to add and sign up these workflows electronically and track them throughout the process. So after I submit this workflow to my IT department, this will allow them to come in, make changes to the document, and add their electronic signature to say that they configure different accounts and route it along throughout the process. So after I work through the entire workflow, I'm going to go into our workflow designer tool, and that will show you how I built out these routes and set up the routing between different IT analysts, the IT manager, and also HR for final review. So to get started with your workflow, assuming you have the permissions, so generally with an IT access request, it would probably be assigned to all managers, you'll be able to click on the Start button and start the workflow. You'll notice with this particular workflow that I'm automatically populating some of the information onto the workflow just to allow me not to have to fill it out manually. So for example, my requester name and my position and title has automatically been inserted onto this particular workflow. Any fields that you would like to design on a particular workflow may be automatically pre-populated from a database lookup. and we allow you to either do a search and look for a particular piece of information that you'd like to populate onto the workflow, or based on user credentials, date and time, etc., we could automatically populate that information onto your electronic workflow. To begin filling out the workflow, it's very simple. I just have to click on each fillable field, and I can begin typing in these free text fields. So for today's demonstration, I'm going to type in the name of the new nurse that I'm hiring, Mary Smith, her employee ID of 1234, position she will be an ICU RN, part of the nursing department. And then down below here for the request date, this is also one of the fields that we're able to automatically populate, or depending on if you need to delay the workflow, if you want to start it at one point and save it and then resume it later, we also give you the option to type in a date as well. So for example, it's December 16th right now. I could either type in December 16th, or if I want to start the workflow and then submit it tomorrow, I could type in tomorrow's date. So there's a lot of different options with pre-populating the information and inserting dates and data from databases automatically. As I scroll down, this is where, as the hiring manager, I'm able to set up the permissions for this particular user. So I'd like Mary to have an email account. I need her to have a network login. She needs access to our HIS system, and with some of our standard profiles, I want to assign her specifically to a nurse ICU profile. So all of these drop-down lists are configurable. You could type in any information that you would like there to match your current IT accounts that you have in place at your hospital. I'm also going to set Mary up with a portal login, but I want to make sure that my portal login for Mary is restricted to just the ICU. So I'm going to request different access for that by checking this checkbox here. And finally, under the explanation of exceptions, I'm just going to put a note in for our IT department to restrict Mary's portal access to the ICU only. Now that I have all the information that I need filled out as the hiring manager, what I could do is I could click on Save. This is going to validate the form, so any type of information that you added in data lookups and restrictions and validation that you have in place that you designed in your workflow, we'll just check to make sure that all required fields, etc., are filled out. Once I have saved the document, I'll be able to see a little bit of information on what needs to be complete. So, for example, under my workflow actions, I still need to approve the document as the hiring manager and insert my signature on the document electronically. I could see that both of those fields are not complete at this time. Also down below, I have the option to add attachments for new hire information. So, for example, if I need to attach any type of supporting documentation to this type of workflow, I could choose files and upload those files so that they're included when the document gets routed over to our IT department. And the FastFlow system allows you to pick and choose whether or not the attachments are required. So if there's a particular attachment that you want to make sure is always required and must be submitted before the workflow is passed along to IT, in our Workflow Designer tool, you could just check the required box to ensure that the end user does attach that required piece of documentation. So if everything looks good here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Sign and Send up at the top. And what that's going to do is it's going to electronically insert my signature onto the document and route the document over to our IT department. Now in FastFlow, since we're doing everything electronically rather than on paper and an inter-office envelope, at any point I'm able to log into my FastFlow workflows and click on my sent items, and I'll be able to see a list of workflows and notifications that I've sent. So for today's demo, I could see the IT access request that I created on December 16th at 12:07 p.m. And I can see that the present location is over at IP Analyst 1. So it's really handy in that it allows your staff, after they submit a workflow, to be able to log in and track to see where it is, whose signature, whose virtual desk it's waiting on for approval. So I could tell as the nursing manager that currently my workflow has been received by the IP Analyst 1, and it's just waiting for them to review and sign the document. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to log in as the IT Analyst 1 to show you the process of how I would receive a workflow and how I can make changes to it and add information to the workflow. FastFlow can be configured to send out email notifications to your staff so that IT Analyst 1 can receive an email saying that they have a new pending request in FastFlow and to log in. Within the email, we could include the hyperlink as well. So rather than logging into FastFlow directly, we can pass the user's Windows credentials over to the FastFlow system and automatically log them in and bring up the workflow that they need to work on. So once I bring up the IT access request that was just previously filled out by the hiring manager, I'm logged in now as Isabel, and she's our IT analyst 1. She's able to see the workflow that was previously submitted, so I can click on Enlarge, be able to see all the information that Ryan filled out with the employee information, the hiring manager's information, and the type of counts and information that needs to be created for our new hire. After I make the account, my system's set up so that Isabel creates email logins. So after I created my email login in Exchange, in the Active Directory account, what I could do as Isabel is view the document and just mark up the document to show that that was complete. So what I could do here is I could scroll down into my document. I could check the checkbox that says the network login and the email login were both created and add my initials. You'll see down below here that the requester, when Ryan originally signed the document to pass it over to IT Analyst, his signature was also inserted onto the document. So I'm going to save this document. I'll be able to see the high-level preview again. I could see Ryan's signature down below. I could see the information that I filled in as the IT Analyst with setting up those accounts. And at this point, I could see under my workflow actions that I just need to approve the document and sign it and send it to the next party. So once I send this over to the next party, what's going to happen, it will get routed over to IT Analyst 2, who will be responsible for setting up the HIS login for the nurse in the ICU. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as IT Analyst 2. FastFlow would also send that email notification over to our second analyst, just alerting them that they do have a new pending request, and Isaac can log into the system and be able to approve his workflow that he needs to complete as well for his step actions. So once I bring up the preview, I'll be able to see that, I have the original signature from Ryan when it was submitted, and I could see that Isabel electronically signed the document as well with the date and time stamp on December 16th at 12:12 p.m., showing that she was able to create the accounts for the email login and network login. So at this point on Isaac, so what Isaac's going to do, he's going to set up his HIS login and then update this workflow just by clicking on View Documents. He's going to come back here, click on the HIS login was created, and type in his initials. Similar process to the previous step. He also has to sign and approve the document. So I can click on Sign and Send, and this will send the workflow over to the next party, which will be IT Analyst 3 to set up the portal login. Now, there's a lot of different actions that are possible when you build these workflows out. You could set up different types of email notifications. You could also set up different actions, such as exporting the workflow as TIFF image files to be stored for archiving. You could write different information to databases, etc. And each one of those actions can either be performed at the very end of the workflow when everything is completed, or you could also set it up to perform those actions throughout the process at each individual step. So for example, maybe the IT Analyst 1 and 2 would like to receive email notifications, but number 3 and the manager would not. If they're always logging into the system, they don't want to be bombarded with extra emails. So they could turn those features on and off depending on their permissions and also the actions that they'd like to have performed within their workflows. So finally, at the last step, what I'm going to do is IT Analyst 3, just come in here, check the box that say my portal login was created, sign it as IT3, and save the document, and then route it over to my IT manager for final approval. So there's the two last steps that have been built into this particular workflow. We need to capture the electronic signature of everyone, all the system administrators that are creating accounts, IT Analysts 1, 2, and 3. We're also going to gather the electronic signature of the IS manager, and then finally the human resources manager as well for final approval. And as I mentioned before, throughout the process, as the hiring manager, Ryan, when I originally created that request, at any point, I'm able to log into the system and see where each one of these workflows is currently stationed. So, if I submitted a workflow a week ago and I'm wondering why the user accounts have not been created yet, I'll be able to log in and see whose virtual desk it's sitting on. If it's still waiting on perhaps, IT Analyst 1, or maybe the IS Manager just to issue final approval before the accounts get, created and passed over to HR. So as the hiring manager, Ivy, right now, I'm logged into the system. Everything looks good on this particular workflow. All the accounts have been set up. No exceptions or notes have been added in to say there was an issue with creating any type of accounts. I could see all my IT analyst signatures here at the bottom with the date and timestamp of when they created the accounts and approved the workflow. So the final step here before I send this document over to HR to gather the human resources signature is just to click Sign and Send, and that will send it over to our HR department. Now, the way I have this particular workflow built out, and I'm going to go into this in a little more detail after I gather this final signature, is I have the routing set up to go through different IT analysts based on if certain checkboxes are selected or not. So each one of these routes can be configured that if, for example, an email login checkbox is selected, that it gets routed to IT Analyst 1. If a portal login is selected, it can get routed to IT Analyst 3. If for some reason that, the portal login box is not checked, it would bypass IT Analyst 3 altogether and just get routed directly over to the IS Manager. So we have a lot of flexibility in the routes that we create within FastFlow, and we are able to create those routes and route it to different organizations, whether or not it's a group in the hospital, particular users, a particular role, etc., based on criteria that has been filled out onto the form. Another example may be if, for example, this Remove All Information Systems Access box was checked, we could set it up and route this form to a completely different person automatically and bypass everyone else just to close down all the accounts. So it's really up to your hospital on how you want to set up the routing, but we can match your current processes on how you send your IT access requests around the hospital for different account creations and approval processes. So what I'm going to do now, I just finished the workflow. I added everyone's signature onto the electronic document. So I'm going to log in as our administrator just to show you the completed document and then also how I built out this route and some of the options that we have. Now, for demonstration purposes, I made myself an administrator, but typically the user that would be filling out the IT access request would not have administration permissions. So you're able to delegate which users have full administration access into the into your workflows to build out those routes, etc. So here's an example of our Visual Workflow Designer tool, and this is the route that I set up to be able to route my IT access requests to my analyst, my IS manager, and then over to the HR department. So starting with the initiator, that's the very first step on the person that's filling out the workflow to pass that request along to someone else in your organization. You'll notice that I have two icons listed under the initiator role. I have a pen icon, which just indicates that the user must electronically sign the document so that their signature appears on the document as the one requesting this. And I also have a paperclip icon to allow you to add attachments onto the particular workflow. So in the event that you do need to attach any additional new hire support information, the user could attach PDF files, image files, etc., basically any type of file onto the workflow and have that routed along to each individual analyst and manager for approval. If I click on the paperclip icon, you'll notice down here I do have that required box. So if I choose the box and make it a required attachment, we'll do data validation and make sure that they have the attached document onto the workflow before they allow them to sign and approve the workflow and route it on to the next party. Now with my IT analyst roles, what I could do here with some of that role-based routing based on the different account creation, if I click on the role itself, I can choose to link this step to a particular form field. So by default, I have the form automatically getting routed over to IT Analyst 1. But if I only want to route it to IT Analyst 1 if that email login is checked, I could choose to link it to a particular checkbox. I could choose a field type, so for example, the checkbox field, and this would be one of the fields that I have included on my document. And I could scroll through the list of all the checkboxes that I have on my document to select one, so I'm going to choose the email login, and then a condition, whether or not it's checked or unchecked. So if I set up the role based on this criteria right here, basically if I choose that checkbox next to email login, this workflow will automatically get routed over to IT Analyst 1. However, if that checkbox is not checked, it will bypass IT Analyst 1 and go directly over to IT Analyst 2 to set up any other accounts, such as the HIS login or the portal login as well. Another example for creating your routes rather than routing them to individual people, you could also choose to do group-based routing. So if I delete a couple of these routes here, up in my step actions here, I could choose the route based on prompting the user. What this will allow me to do is the initiator, when they fill out the workflow, they'll be able to choose a list of users from the drop-down list that you specify on who should receive the workflow. I can also choose to pass by form data, so depending on a piece of information that's filled on the form, route it to a particular person. I could choose to route it based on a particular role. So rather than hard coding it to a particular user, we could assign it to a role such as IT Analyst 3, and then whichever employee that you have assigned to that particular role, they would receive the workflow. And one step that's really handy is our group-based routing. So for example, if you want to route it over to your entire IT department or entire HR department, for example, we could do group-based routing. And the way group-based routing works is you add the group, and then you could choose the particular group that you would like to send the form to. So for example, I could send it to information technology. And I have a couple different options here. I could choose group approval, and I could also link this to a particular field on the workflow as well. Now, what's nice about group approval, basically without group approval, as soon as it goes to the entire group, as soon as one person in the group approves the workflow, it would get routed on to the next step. However, with group approval, that allows you to type in a certain percentage of users that must approve the workflow before the workflow gets routed on to the IS manager in this particular case. So for example, if I choose group approval to be 50, if I have 10 members in my IT group, at least 5 of them, 50% of the group, must approve the workflow before it gets routed on to the next person in that particular workflow. So it's really handy if people will be out on vacation, but you need to have a couple people approve the document. Rather than routing it to individuals, you could route it to an entire group, and then as soon as the percentage of the group accepts the workflow as you define, it gets routed on to the next step. Now finally, at the very end of the workflow, and we could use these step actions also throughout the process, this is where you define what happens to the data that you've just collected. So we have a lot of different step actions here. Some of the step actions that I commonly use would be the email notifications. So for example, I could choose to send out email notifications to each user as the workflow is routed over to them, just so that they receive that email message to say that they have a new pending request. Please log into the system and approve your workflow. I also like to send a return to sender notification. So what this does is it sends an email notification back to the initiator that created the original request, just to let them know that their workflow is fully complete and it's in the final disposition phase. Some of the more commonly used elements also include writing to a database. So for example, I could grab this database icon, drag it onto the particular final disposition step, and basically any of that information that we filled out in the fillable text fields, checkboxes, electronic signature fields, etc., is all written to a Microsoft SQL database so that you could access that data directly to create some custom reports. Or within FastFlow, we also have reports as well and dashboards that you could use to track your data, track the progress on how long it takes a workflow to move through a particular step action. You can also see how many accounts have been set up, how many workflows in this particular case were designated to have an email login created, a network login created, etc. So all that information, you're able to query that information out of the database to generate custom reports. We can also choose to write it to our internal content management system. So what this is, maybe used for is if you want to archive the workflow. So for example, I can archive it at the HR step as well. Maybe HR would like to have a special section within FastFlow under an application here called Human Resources, where they're able to click on that and see all the workflow IT access requests that have come through to create new user accounts. So rather than accessing the SQL data directly, they want to use the dashboards and reporting features within FastFlow to be able to easily view that information. And finally, we could also, as another example, export to a TIFF image file, and this could happen along any step as well. It does not necessarily need to occur at the final disposition. As an HR manager, maybe I want that image file exported after I've signed it and sent over to the employee's personnel file as well. So we could drag any one of these step actions onto each individual step to assign what happens with the data at that point. Real quick, I know we're running short on time here, but as I mentioned briefly before, we do have these applications that we've built out within FastFlow, and they are group or user specific. So for example, we could create HR workflows and applications to be able to very easily view any of the workflows that have been routed through the HR system. We could see the archives on what workflows have come through. We could run some of our reporting tools as well to generate. This one has a few reports here to generate custom reports, etc. So FastFlow gives you a lot of different options on what to do with the data. We are capturing it and storing it all in SQL, and you are more than welcome to use third-party tools such as Crystal Reports and other SQL tools for querying that data, or you could use the internal reports and content management features that we have built into FastFlow for easy access.